What's going on, guys? JPS back for another video, and today we're going to be reacting to 7 American habits that are rude in the UK. And this video is coming from an American in the UK. So this one should be good, guys. Let's see some things that I've been doing when I'm across the pond that maybe I shouldn't be doing. Consider joining the Patreon. It's the first link in the description for full reactions to British movies and TV shows. We're coming down the home stretch and Only Fools and Horses. We're on to the specials, which there's like 10 of them at the end of the show. So if you guys want to see that along with so many other reactions, I promise it's worth a try. But either way, I appreciate you for watching this. Let's get right into it.
The British person that I was with was like, we can't just move. We have to ask. And I'm like, you don't have to ask. You just do it, and then it happens. Honestly, I was considered a quiet person in the US. I spent my entire life in the US with people asking me to speak up and to talk louder because they couldn't hear me. I moved to the UK, and within a couple days, people are telling me to be quiet. Hi, and welcome back to the Girl Gone London channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I'm an American who's lived in the UK for over 10 years, and today we're talking about 7 American habits that are considered rude in the UK. I have accumulated many of these examples personally, as well as stories I've heard from fellow American expats who live in the UK and are usually trying to do their best, but are sometimes accidentally being rude or just weird. Now, the first thing on my list of an American thing to do that would be considered rude or not acceptable or just strange in the UK is giving a guest a house tour. So in the States, it's not considered weird. Americans love giving a house tour. A visitor comes over to your house and you want to show them around your house. And I know that the British people in the audience are initially going to think, well, it's because Americans want to show off their house. And we don't do that here. We don't brag about things like Americans do. And in some ways, that could be true. You could be proud of your house or things that you've done to it, and maybe you do want to show it to somebody for some appreciation. However, there is also another element to this to consider. Now, what I've come across in the UK is that your house is considered a very personal space for the people who live there. And of course, you can have visitors over, and people do have visitors over at times, but it seems to be that British people love meeting out and about. So typically, a British home is
At the pub, bro. The pub is your house. There's no point in having people over. I think another thing that makes British houses more personal would be just the size of them, because they're just smaller. So it's a more intimate setting, and I can understand that, because in the United States, you're not going to bring someone to your bedroom and show that, you know? So there is that, but I think she is right about the bragging part. You know, I can imagine that people have some guests over. They're like, oh, look at our new renovation. Look at the new kitchen, da da da. And it definitely is for that. The United States, what's really popular is bragging to people that you don't like or care about. Like literally buying things to achieve status among people that you hate deep down. It's quite sad. And you can see it play out a lot, guys.
going to be smaller than an American home in many instances, so practically it doesn't always make sense to have people in your space. But equally in the UK, we have pub culture and restaurants that allow you to sit and enjoy your meal for more than like 20 minutes. So in the UK, meeting friends and meeting people out is much more done than in the US. In the US, we do enjoy our home as a place to have people over for longer periods of time. And so this reflects back on why Americans love giving a house tour, because in some ways we are trying to make our guests feel at home. And I'm not in any way saying that we're showing them our underwear drawer, but you might show them around and take them around your house in kind of a welcoming kind of way. This isn't done in the UK. So if you have people over, they stick to the rooms that they're allowed in. Most of the house, you like practically board up when someone's coming over, and that's where the visitor is supposed to be. And again, I'm not saying Americans like have guests to their home just wandering every inch of your space, but when they would come to the door, you would welcome them in, and if they haven't been to your home before, you would usually give them some type of tour. Now, the tour of my house in the UK...
This is a really good point that she brought up, because I had never thought about this before, the whole house tour thing. But yeah, that's so true. And to be fair, we don't really have pubs or centralized locations to meet at that are accessible. Like, you got to drive 30, 40 minutes sometimes. That's a normal drive to meet somebody, which is crazy. The UK, it's like 5-minute walk. Well, depending on where you live, but The pubs are accessible. You guys know that. And again, she was right. They don't rush you around. Like when you go out to eat in the United States, are you still working on that? Are you done? They're trying to just take your plates, move you along, get the bill. No, not in the UK with the pubs. That's one thing I really do miss about visiting is the pub culture, guys. Because yes, drinking is great and all. We know that. But having a place to just meet people, socialize, and being a laid-back environment, you can't beat that. You really can't.
It would be over in about 30 seconds, give them some type of tour. Now, the tour of my house in the UK would be over in about 30 seconds because, as I said, typically homes in the UK are smaller than in the US. But again, this would be considered weird or rude in the UK because it would mostly be seen as you're trying to show off your home, and that's something that is not done. Now, the next thing on my list actually has to do with American servers within a restaurant and the behavior that would be considered rude, which is not only constantly checking in on you and kind of, in some ways, probably to a British person, bothering you during your meal, but in the US, servers
I gotta say, that Aperol Spritz looks delicious. But, again, I just brought this up. It's so true. They do rush you along the whole meal.
As a general rule, this isn't just one person or considered rude or anything. They will give you your check or your bill for the meal basically as soon as they've delivered the food. If not that, like a couple minutes after. That would be considered extremely weird and extremely rude in the UK, as if your server is trying to get rid of you. But the thing is, in America, they kind of are because they rely on tips, which is an entirely different video, and so much of their wage comes from being able to turn over tables quickly, and this would never fly in the UK. The restaurant experience is totally different, and so if a British family does go to the US, that's something to remember, that the American waiter or waitress is not within the context of American culture being rude by giving you your bill for the meal really soon after they serve you your food. Another American habit that is considered rude in the UK has to do with eating as well, and that is to do with what you do with your knife and fork after you finish.
This has probably come up the most on my channel, guys. Cutlery. I have been personally attacked so many times. Listen, some people in other countries eat with their hands. Imagine if I did that. It would probably be World War III in the comment section if I did that on camera, guys. I get it. I will have to say, though, my cutlery skills have improved greatly. I need to showcase them because they are not the same as they used to be. I actually know how to use cutlery now, and I use it. The fact that I didn't really before, listen, I don't really have anything to say about that, guys. Everyone has their own way of eating. In the United States, we are a bit quicker with how we eat. Some of us eat like animals, which we are animals at the end of the day, so don't try and act like you're not. But I appreciate maybe those comments catalyzed the change. Maybe you guys are the reason that I learned cutlery. Deep down, I think it is, honestly. Oh yeah, now I tuck in, got my knife, fork, yes, everything's good.
Finish a meal. So in the UK, the polite thing and general thing you're supposed to do, and people just seem to do as a matter of like not even thinking about it, is you put your utensils together on your plate and it looks something like this. And this is not really done in the US. So there is no official signal for I have finished my food or I am done with my meal. And you kind of just leave your utensils wherever you want to leave them. They could be on the plate, they could be off the plate, they could be making a cross, they could be like just stacked in any weird old way. You basically just throw your utensils down and that means you're done. That is considered rude in the UK in the sense that it's just the polite thing to do to finish your meal by putting your utensils together on the plate, which is something that I have gotten better at remembering to do, but I still have to sometimes remember to do it naturally, and I see other people around me in the UK just doing this naturally, and I have to remember to gather all of my utensils and put them in this line on the plate to show that I'm done. The next thing on my list is Americans being loud. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're not loud. We are loud. Honestly, I was considered a quiet person in the US. I spent my entire life in the US with people asking me to speak up and to talk louder because they couldn't hear me. I moved to the UK and within a couple days, people are telling me to be quiet. Americans just speak loudly. We just are loud, and it's a trait that is considered relatively rude in the UK because it's infringing on other people's right to enjoy the environment surrounding them. And
This is not just in the UK, though. I think this is throughout Europe. Americans don't realize how loud they are until they go elsewhere. Like, honestly, because when we're in this country, bro, people are yelling all the time. If you go into a restaurant, you're going to overhear like 3 or 4 conversations. You're going to be caught up in all of those people's drama, whether you like it or not. It's just something you got to accept. Like, you're going to be hearing that. So you try not to listen, because sometimes I don't want to hear that. Most of the time, I don't want to hear what those people are saying. But it's fine. Like, that's just how it is, guys. And the point about speaking up is very true. People who are more introverted and quiet in the United States are often told to speak up because you need to assert yourself more if you want to express yourself, your opinions, or be heard. Because otherwise, you're just going to get run over. So that's why when I think it's usually children who are more quiet, they're told to speak up. Because, yeah, it's very difficult to speak in certain group settings when everyone else is loud if you're a quiet person. It's hard to butt in and, This
is particularly prevalent with Americans on like public transportation in the UK. So if you take the tube in London or a train, you can usually hear the Americans before you can see them. It's just, we're not trying to be rude. We just culturally are loud. And another thing to remember the next time you hear a loud American in the UK is that within the country that we're from, because everybody is loud, you have to speak louder and louder and louder to be heard over the other people. So it doesn't come across as being loud in the US because everybody's being loud. Whereas here in the UK, definitely people are a bit more reserved and a bit more quiet, and suddenly I become the loudest person in the room. The next American habit that's considered rude in the UK, and this is definitely a little bit of a cringy one, is not saying please or thank you or please can you do this, not having those like niceties attached to what you're saying. And this is definitely one of those things I notice when I'm in the US. An example would be if you are in a store and asking where something is. In the UK, you would go up to a person and you would say, "Oh, sorry, can you please tell me where..."
It's so true, bro. Brits will say sorry even if they didn't do anything wrong. Like, you could bump into a Brit and they'll literally be like, "I'm so sorry." Like, that's just a testament to how polite British people are, and the etiquette surrounding that and manners, which I truly appreciate because I'm someone who does hold those highly, and I'm always saying please and thank you in every interaction because it's important. And Americans really appreciate that because it's not a given. It's not the standard. Like, which is sad. It shouldn't be that way. But there are people who will just, someone does something for them, they just take it and walk away. Like, there's no exchanging of greetings or thank you or whatever. It doesn't matter to them. So that's a good amount of people. So yeah, those manners are definitely missing. They're still here. A lot of Americans are very polite and nice people, but it's just not as widespread as it is in Britain, or uniform in terms of how polite people are.
The flower is, or you would just have all these different words to say excuse me, please can you help me, or something like that. In the US, a lot of people, and this does depend on region a little bit, but a lot of people would just go up to the person in the store and they wouldn't have any of these other words. They would just say, "Where's the flower?" And they might say it in a way that to us in the States is still a nice way of saying it. I'm not saying that they're going to be demanding. We could still say it nicely, but we wouldn't include the other words like excuse me, please can you help me, can you do this? We would just kind of go in directly with our question. And in some ways this may have to do with the American style of direct communication that I talked about in a previous video, but overall it is just sort of bad manners in the UK and in most countries, so I'm not siding with the Americans on this one, but bad manners to not be saying please, not be saying thank you, and things like that. And the next thing on my list that Americans do that can be considered weird in the UK is talking very openly about religion and asking people questions about their religion.
Bro,
and what I mean by
this is a fact. Not just religion, but politics too. Like, people really need to chill with that. I know I'm the one. I'm probably one of the proponents for speaking about religion openly, and I definitely, there are a lot of settings where that is appropriate, especially in the United States, because People are always having debates and talking about that, but the politics is where it gets frustrating, because there's a lot of Americans, you will literally just meet them and they're already asking you how you feel about X situation or this or politician or that, bro. Like, you don't even know me asking about, like, you know what I mean? It's just not appropriate, but we're also just so hyper political and hyper everything at this point. Country's crazy. But yeah, you guys can't talk about the Church of England? Like, what's going on?
Questions about their religion. And what I mean by this is, in the UK, religion is seen as a personal thing. So you might go to church, you might not, you might go to another religious venue, you might not, but you're not going to expect people that you don't know to ask you about it. In the US, this is a little different. As a country, America is much more religious than the UK, and it is seen as more appropriate to ask a stranger maybe where they go to church, because the assumption is that a lot of people do, especially in certain parts of the US, or you might ask them what religion they are. And again, there's going to be differing experiences of this depending on where you live in America and your age and, you know, your social group and things like that. But as a general rule, it's more acceptable in the US to speak about and to ask strangers or acquaintances about religion. In the UK, this is definitely considered rude and not acceptable because religion is viewed as a much more intensely personal and private thing. And the final thing on my list has to do with queuing. Of course it does. The American habit that is considered rude in the UK is essentially pushing to the front of things or taking things before you.
This habit is so bad, guys. I can give a little personal anecdote here. So I was standing in line for a bar, and I was standing in line, like actually waiting my turn, but people just kept on cutting. There's like this point, it's a really long line this night, right? There's a point like halfway through the line where I guess security or the bouncers can't see you, so just groups of people just cut and cut in front, and literally I didn't even end up getting in to the bar that night because people just kept cutting. Like, to get into the bar, the standard was to cut in front of other people. Like, it's just really a lack of integrity when it comes to queuing. And same thing with cars. If you're waiting in line, if you're in a traffic jam, for example, oftentimes people will overtake you on the emergency shoulder, which is blocked off by a white line. You're not supposed to cross into that unless, again, there's an emergency, your car is broken down or something like that. Instead, people just take complete advantage. If you're in like a 4-lane highway and traffic is not moving, you're at a standstill, people will cut into the emergency lane and blow ahead of everyone. Because people don't feel like waiting their turn. Like, there's no one holding them accountable. There's way too many opportunities to cheat and cut. And that's literally the most frustrating part about American culture to me, I feel like. Because as a person who is waiting my turn and takes the queue seriously, I just get punished by all these people cutting, and you know what I mean? It gets really frustrating, guys. But the vast majority of people do wait, but there are a lot of people who cut and don't wait their turn, and that manifests itself in all of these different situations. I mean, I just gave you 2 examples, a bar and a highway. This happens like every day. People just, oh God.
You wait your turn or you ask. In the UK, the art of queuing is well known. People are very good at it. People are good at lining up, waiting for things, waiting your turn. The British way is sort of just being like, no, you go first. No, you go first. Or just really having a sense of order when it comes to who gets what next. In America, it is kind of everyone for yourself. We are very bad at lining up. I don't know if you've seen the scene in an iconic American Christmas film called Jingle All the Way, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people. But there is a scene when they get a toy into the toy shop that all the parents want, and they essentially trample each other to get to it. This has happened in the US. This is something that I watch and I'm like, yes, this makes sense for America. This is kind of how we operate. And we can even take it from the funny, silly, like, physical example of, you know, not being able to line up or like rushing into a toy shop or something like that. But it also tends to extend to other areas as well. So as an example, there was one time when I was on a plane traveling with a British person, and the plane had empty seats in the same like economy section that we booked, so it wasn't like first class empty seats, but there were empty seats, and there were seats that I would have preferred to sit in more than the one that I had, but there weren't that many empty seats. So my American self was like, we're just gonna move. We're just gonna move. We're not gonna ask. We're just gonna go and move to these other seats that are empty. And this has always worked for me. This is just the American way. I see something that's open. I'm like, okay, nobody else is using this, and it's in the same class that I've booked. So I'm just gonna go and sit there. I'm gonna take it. The British person that I was with was like, we can't just move. We have to ask. And I'm like, you don't have to ask. You just do it, and then it happens. But the British way can be seen as much more polite and less rude, to not just go and assume you can do things, but to ask, to again wait your turn. Is it okay if I go and sit in that other seat? Where the American in me was just like, no one else is doing it, so I'm gonna go and do it. Or if you're in a grocery store or something similar, maybe you come up to an item that is running out and you get to it at the same time as another person. In the UK, it's often the polite thing to say, oh no, go ahead, you have it, you take it. An American is like, no, I got here 0.3 seconds before you, I'm taking this, have a nice day. I'm not saying it's the best trait to have. I'm just saying that is what Americans are kind of conditioned to be like.
Yeah, it kind of just makes us all assholes, to be honest. Like, slightly, yeah.
You can call it entitled, or you can call it bold, whatever you want to see it as. That is definitely an American habit that is not considered acceptable and is considered rude in the UK. Now that brings me to the end of this list. I hope you...
Okay. This was a really good video. Make sure you guys give a subscription to Girl Gone London. I really liked her examples that she brought up. And the plane thing, like, yes, everything is a free-for-all. So if you see an empty seat, just sit in it. If you're on an American flight, at least. But I wish she told the rest of the story to see what happened with that. But yeah, that was 7 American habits that are rude in the UK. There were some great points brought up here that I had not previously thought of. And yeah, Americans definitely got to tone themselves down when they visit the UK. Otherwise, there will be some awkward situations. So, and I've certainly been in them as well. I had to learn the hard way. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if there's anything that she missed in the comments. For those of you living in the UK, are there some stories you have of rude Americans that you've had to interact with or anything like that? Please throw it in the comments. I want to hear about it. Yeah, so with that being said, guys, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.